version of Vegas? Really?
No, not bootleg. I said honky tonk.
Honky tonk.
I think it's a better version than Vegas. But what I mean is, every time I go to the airport to go traveling for work, I always see people coming in for bachelorette parties and bachelor parties and stuff like that. So it's a place. It's kind of like a destination location for people that are trying to party. You know, I'd say.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
Vegas, New Orleans, and Nashville kind of all have a little bit of the same vibe going on.
Yeah, I've been to New Orleans. It's really interesting. When you go to New Orleans, you come to the realization that all you can do there is drink, eat, and party.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all you do in New Orleans.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, just sit there, watch music, drink, and eat.
Dude, the alcohol over there is bizarre. They give you like these alcoholic slushies in New Orleans are like this big.
Oh yeah.
And it's like you get a brain freeze and you get drunk at the same time. It's like, this is the best marketing campaign I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I mean, I think they stole a couple of ideas from Spring Breakdown in Florida. I mean, back in the day in the 90s, I used to go down to Key West and Panama City and all those places, and they had stuff like that all over the place. The 180 proof liquor slushies, you know.
Oh my god, I live down here in South Florida. I've never been down to the Keys yet.
Yeah, it's fun. I don't know how much of a thing it is now, but when I was in my 20s, Key West was a fun place to go.
It's still a thing. It's just it's a little bit of a pain in the butt to get there because
it's a one lane highway essentially to get out there.
Mm-hmm. We have a lot of snowbirds.
If anybody gets in a car accident, you're stuck for hours.
Living out here, that happens every minute, on the hour, on the clock. There's a reason why police officers are never seen anywhere in like South Florida. It's kind of like, you know, it's like where the cops are. Oh, right, they're taking care of all the car accidents.
Yeah,
fun stuff. Oh man, well, you know, we were talking about earlier about like you were saying that you moved from LA to Nashville. It's interesting because I feel like a lot of people and just people that I've been talking with, like our lives have completely altered since the pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, when you talk about like any other like time in history, like 9/11 or the, you know, the recession that took place in 2008.
Yep.
You don't really see people like, my whole life has changed. I did a whole different direction. I moved something completely different. It's like only recently, like 2020, that this insane man-made virus that was released out of a lab caused this manic freak that everybody's life has now completely changed.
I've got my theories on that. So it's not like conspiracy theory or anything. Okay. It's more like technological. So my belief is that if the pandemic would have happened 10 years prior, it would have completely destroyed our economy. It would have shut us down. We would have been way worse off. We would have actually, I mean, we probably would have never sheltered in place. It wouldn't have been possible without completely ruining the economy. So if you think about it, if you back up a step, the computing and computer technology wasn't as advanced enough back in 2008, 2010 as it became in 2020. So the pandemic, what it brought upon us was, you know, we probably accelerated technology by about 5 years just to accommodate for sheltering in place. And what I mean by that is the amount of broadband speed you needed and the amount of computer hard drive space you needed to be able to actually sit on Zoom calls all day long is incredible. And our computers back in 2008 would have not been able to accommodate it. So if you wanted to work from home, you would have had to be on a lot of phone calls. You wouldn't be able to see each other's faces and stuff like that. And
Skype wasn't really that great back in 2000. Well, really wasn't.
It wasn't at all. And you had to pay by the minute.
It was terrible.
But nowadays, you know, like, you know, video computing on computer. I mean, that's why we're able to have video podcasts, and there's so many of them out there. But yeah, we wouldn't have been able to do the same kind of work, or been able to actually be as effective as at our jobs if the pandemic had come 10 to 15 years earlier. So I think they probably either would have just let us go to work and get each other sick and just deal with it that way, or they would have shut things down and we would have been way worse off.
You bring up a really excellent point, because as somebody that was born in 1999, so I'm 25, I am one of the last generations that can remember what it was like before 2010. 2010 was a very crucial year, because by the year 2010, it was the boom of the software. Like, it was the boom of software that we've never seen before. I mean, you got iPads and insane speeds in technology. Computers got smaller and faster and better. You had smartphones, like you no longer needed really to have an iPod. And TV started becoming cheaper. I remember like in 2011, like one of the first flat screen TVs that were like the cheapest on the market was like from Sony. And it was like $29.99.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember
insane. It's crazy.
I mean, and I remember 2014 was a big year for me. That's when I started at VaynerMedia under Gary. And I remember going there, and back in those days, you couldn't put a video on Facebook. That's how like rudimentary the technology was then versus how it is now. And I've been in kind of like the enterprise level social media space since 2008. And the reason why social media was such a novice play and didn't have a lot of respect from other marketers from a channel perspective was that you couldn't do anything there. All you could really do is post like text only tweets and maybe some image posts on Instagram and stuff like that. Nowadays, you could upload an entire movie in 4K to Facebook if you want to for 2 hours. I mean, it can render up to 4 hours worth of high quality 4K content. I mean, the world just wasn't in that place back in those days. So like, I don't even know what would have happened if there was a COVID back in 2008 through 2014, but we wouldn't have been able to survive the way we did. And, to be honest with you, I think what most people recognized once they learned, hey, technology can support this work from home behavior, they realized that, especially if you're kind of established in your career, it's hard to really beat not having a commute every day and like being able to save money, live anywhere in the country you want kind of thing. If you had a company that was more progressive in that sense, you could actually wind up flipping, the leverage upside down and being able to claim, a lot more wealth for yourself versus a, relatively middle class existence.
Yeah, you're able to get yourself more opportunities and possibilities that you've ever had before. The thing like is there's been this constant also fear of like artificial intelligence.
Yep.
And I can tell you as a podcaster, I know you're a podcaster yourself, I don't think I can survive solo doing all of the work that I've been doing without ChatGPT and using artificial intelligence. Like, it helps me with my podcast descriptions. It helps me with my podcast titles. I have like this is using artificial intelligence to alter and edit and render our audio so that it sounds like we're in a professional setting and we're in the same room. And like you said, it's like we're at a point where technology is rapidly advancing to where I don't know where this is going. I don't hate it though.
Well, I mean, there's two camps. You can either be afraid of it and pretend that it's going to destroy the world and the robots are going to take over and, kill us all. Or you can look at it as, how can I take advantage of it? And how can I use my creative mind to be more efficient, more productive, do something amazing for the world? There's really two trains of thought. I tend to really veer towards the latter. I don't really know which way everything is going to shake out, whether or not robots are going to take over the world and kill everybody, or whether or not we can use this AI technology to kind of create world peace. But I'll tell you what I don't want to have happen. I don't want to be left on the sidelines and have all of my skills eroded and not be a valuable member of society. So I'm learning it. I'm you mentioned ChatGPT. I also run a consulting company, and ChatGPT is like my top employee. I use it for everything. So
It's a really great tool, and like the one thing this is science fiction, but I bring this up sometimes. Like I use like Star Trek as a great example. You think of somebody like Gene Roddenberry, where he viewed the future, 3 or 4 thousand years into the future, and they have artificial intelligence.
oh yeah.
And look how they adapted and interacted it with their own technology, the way that their spacecrafts, communications, holodecks, medical bays, like they use artificial intelligence for medical treatments to help people with different illnesses and being able to figure out how to cure them. It's like like you said, you can put yourself in that like fear mongering where like you have a pandemic and that can literally crush society. Or what has happened now is it's actually blossomed. It's given people like us more opportunities than we've ever had before.
Oh yeah, there's a great equalizing effect. Almost, it's or you can look at it as the democratization of content and content creators. So, or the rise of independent media. However you want to view it, I personally believe that traditional media, like CNN and Fox News and just regular NBC and all those different guys out there, I think they're all going to be gone in 10 years. And I think it's mainly because of this format. I think nobody trusts the people, or not necessarily trust the people. Nobody really trusts the networks, and there's always some sort of an ulterior motive or an agenda. And why trust those people when there's literally thousands of other opinions out there that you can trust? And it may look different. I mean, trust me, I'm not a big fan of the idea of journalism going away. I mean, I went to mass communication school. I studied journalism, all that kind of stuff. I'm a believer in good ethical journalism. I just don't think it exists today as it was when as the journalism was that I studied once upon a time. Everything is motive driven and ideological. So if you're going to get that from the Wall Street Journals and the New York Times and the NBCs and the Fox Newses of the world, you can't really trust any of them anymore. So like if you're posed with an option of trust these guys that are all part of this big establishment, or trust Joe Rogan or Russell Brand or any of these guys that are the big mega podcasters and YouTubers out there, I kind of trust the little guys, the independent guys that are thinking for themselves right now.
And something, it just goes to show you that all people ask for is for you to just be honest. I mean, as a business owner, as a podcaster, as a content creator, it's like, why hide behind a filter? Why hide behind an agenda or a personal opinion that you don't even connect with? You have nothing to, and you have to make the choice. Do you want to be a part of the wagon that goes down with the ship? Be part of that group, or do you want to get off and be a part of something that it's you? You know what I mean? Like this idea of like collective versus individuality.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, I'd rather be a part of the group of people that thinks for themselves and ask their own questions. You can tell almost right away when somebody in the media is bought and paid for, because they ask the question that some apparatus behind the scenes wants them to ask. Podcasters in a lot of cases, and YouTubers for that matter, they do their own research. They book their own guests. They, in some cases they have their own agencies that do that kind of stuff. But if I watch the news, almost in every single instance, the host that you have on the TV screen, they didn't book the guests. They don't really know that much about the guests. They have to be briefed and they have to be told what questions to ask. You can see straight through those things, and you can see that there is some sort of a underlying agenda in those interviews and stuff like that. When I watch a 3-hour long podcast, these people are feeling it out, right? They know a little bit about the guest. That's why they booked them. They know that their audience would resonate with the guest. But by and large, they're digging deep, deep, deep beyond the surface. There's no 10-minute segments. There's no commercial breaks coming or anything like that. Like, they're sitting down and they're going deep on things, you know? So I think you just get a more unfiltered picture of what's going on. And if people choose to go on to these podcasts, they've got to, tell the truth or somebody's going to call bullshit on them.
It's really strange because I think like it took the pandemic for people to be really fed up and tired. The reality is that inflation has increased. We're all about the artist. That is the whole purpose of this podcast, period. And you have a really valuable tool. You can share this with artists, people that are creative, someone that can enjoy this podcast and really enjoy the experience of Lost in the Groove. So with that, let's jump back to today's episode, shall we? Exponentially, a lot of people are suffering, mentally and physically. Like I can even say for myself, like I've been struggling mentally and financially because of all what's been going on. And what I've started to kind of come to realize is that I am not the only person that feels this way.
Mm-hmm.
There are over 300 million Americans in this country.
Yep.
And I'm damn right to believe that out of those 300 million Americans, that they only have two opinions. They only pick one side.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe that. Got Midwesterners, West Coasters, Northeast, the South, and then you get into the little suburbs and the small we are such a diverse culture, and instead of us screaming for individuality, here it is now in its full colors.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge problem in society that we have today, that we only have two parties that represent so many different diverse opinions. God. And it's actually quite scary because it just continues to create this mega divide. I tell my conservative parents all the time, I'm like, look, the reason why you're so passionate about this is because you picked your team, right? And your team plays this other team, right? And so, like, the good analogy that I have for them is like, pick a sports rivalry that you're interested in. Like, I grew up a Washington Commanders fan, and so did my dad. He raised me a Commanders fan, and they played the Dallas Cowboys as their biggest rival. But imagine the Commanders are playing the Dallas Cowboys every game of the season, 17 weeks out of the year. And that's the only matchup you get to watch for 35 years or 44 years. You're probably going to wind up hating the Cowboys pretty much, right? So that's kind of the world we live in with politics, is that most people pick a side. They pick they align their values with those parties. And they wind up voting either red or blue full ticket all the way down. And not everybody, obviously. There's a big gap in the middle where, like, I'm in the middle and I vote my conscience either one way or the other.
I'm a libertarian, so
it doesn't really matter what party.
Yeah.
But you do have so many people that are driving the narrative on the news screens that are these straight down the ticket Republicans or straight down the ticket Democrats, and they're the ones with the loudest voices, even though they're not the majority of the people. And so, I don't really know how you fix it when you've got these two parties and then you've got all these billionaires lining their pockets and trying to get what they want. And honestly, the billionaires don't care which party wins. They're going to pay off both of them, both parties. So, we're sitting in the middle and we're screwed, but, their agendas get across.
It's, it's wild though, because I know that you have a family and I know you have a business. And when you think about like basic things like education, housing, safe community, none of this has to do with politics. None of this is Republican. None of this is Democrat. None of this is conservative. None of this is liberal. Like, if somebody told me that, I would be like, are you fucking nuts? You mean to tell me that family is a liberal thing? Okay. You tell that to all the parents that has kids. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna be like, "What? What's wrong with you? We just wanted kids. What does it have to do with politics?" But for some odd reason in this country, we've managed to turn all of these problems into political agendas.
Sure. Yeah.
Why? It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense.
I think it's just because we haven't really had any politicians over the past 50 years, I think, that have really worked to unify the country. I know Barack Obama really promised that with his 2008 campaign, but I think once he got into, and I voted for him the first time around, but once he got into office, he kind of just fell into line and didn't really live up to that promise of hope or unity. But it's not just him; like it's all of them. None of them really, they all kind of line up with their base and just kind of vote that way. And it's unfortunate. Like I think other
Except a
nations
few.
except a few,
Like
I think.
John F. Kennedy. Well, they ended up killing him, but yeah,
but that was more than 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So I mean, what we've had, I guess, since I mean, I was a Clinton fan, I guess. So I mean, back in the 90s, I think Clinton midway through his 8 years did a pretty good job. They passed a budget and they balanced the budget with the Republicans. You saw Democrats and Republicans working together. But that's really the last time that we haven't had gridlock in Washington. And that's 1994. So we're looking at what,
damn, that's like over 20.
It's 30 years, roughly 30 years ago.
Crazy. I mean, like,
that's longer than you've been alive.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's a long time to not have people getting along in Washington.
Yeah, it's true. And I was thinking about this the other day, like going even back further in history, take somebody like Teddy Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt was an interesting guy because he wasn't really educated and what we call like a modern day president. And he's one of the last presidents that he just cared about the Americas. Mm-hmm. And he wanted people, like the American people, to experience national parks. Mm-hmm. And that's what he spent his presidential, like years doing, is help creating national parks. And, today a lot of people they'll post on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram about all of these beautiful parks and stuff that they're going to. And in a way, it was kind of started by one guy, mm-hmm. That like, he didn't really care about the political agenda. He didn't really care that much about politics. He just wanted to do something good for his country.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't really know much about Teddy Roosevelt because it was like over 100 years ago. But I will say that one advantage that he most likely got to enjoy was he didn't have the constant spotlight of the media and social media on him 24/7. So, I mean, I think he predates the television. And he definitely didn't have the iPhone or social media. Like,
I think, let's do a quick look. Let me see. No, you keep going. I'm going to check to actually see when he was president.
So I feel like there's a lot of pressure for these politicians and specifically the president to, I mean, no matter what you do in 2024, somebody's going to have an attack narrative against you, right? But back in Teddy Roosevelt's day, he could go out and carve out the budget and carve out the space for 100 national parks, and nobody's really going to bother him about it. Nobody's certainly going to fight him on it, right? And if they did, it would take a massive news cycle of a few weeks to really rally any negative sentiment because all they had was newspapers, right? So, I don't know. I don't really look back on those times as the good old days because I don't remember what it's like to not have television. I wasn't alive. But I have to imagine there is something a little bit, kind of nice about the idea of life in the world being a lot simpler, right? And I think maybe that's part of the problem with us as a society is we overcomplicate things with how much technology we get addicted to or need.
Right. I did actually check. He was president from 1901 to 1909.
Yes, that's 110 plus years ago.
Yeah.
I might have had some radio back then, but I know they had the newspaper.
But kind of think about it like this: again, whatever his agenda was, and again, I'm not going to go through the whole entire article, but think about it like this. Him as a person, what he was able to leave off, because he's been dead for a very long time, is national parks. Is something that people for whatever the next 100 to 300 years can keep on visiting, seeing the wonders of nature. And like that's what I was saying again, is like the idea of where if you're here to make change and you're here to make promise, I don't want to hear a speech. Do something. You know what I mean? It's like he did something. There are other presidents that have done other things as well. But it's not necessarily about you being president, you being giving out the promise. It's about being a responsible person, being capable and able to your job, and not giving over like exaggerated expectations that you know that you can never accomplish.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge problem. You see it now with all the campaign promises of the guys running for office in 2024.
Don't get me started with DeSantis.
Well, I think
don't get me started. We're out here in Florida and we're like, dear God, when is his?
I think what you're hinting at is like instead of having a opinion on everything that needs to get done societally here in America, right? Admit to the fact there's some things that I don't know what I would do if confronted with that. And that's okay. Not every president is going to get, most presidents don't get hardly anything done in their 4 years in office. So I think it's fine. I think it's only human for people to admit that they're not knowledgeable or not smart on certain topics, or that it's a topic that, honestly is not that it's not top of radar for them. So they're going to, even though their opinion might be divisive, it's not one that they're going to touch while they're in office. And if people were just more transparent about that, I think we'd all be like, okay, you sound like one of us that's just in the middle, just kind of like a normal person that doesn't have an opinion on every single possible topic out there. And your agenda is a little bit more focused. You want to get in there and really focus on, 1 to 5 different things that are really important to you and passionate to you that are going to create, peace and prosperity in this country, as well as a legacy for you as a president. I'd much rather a president come in and tackle 1 to 5 things and do a really good job of it than have to have an opinion on 55 different things and do all of them really bad.
Yeah, and something, you bring up a really great point, because when you really boil down to in this country, because we're 50 states, and the reality is that as little as the president is important pertaining to our own well-being, our governors are extremely important, because the problem with our governors is that they're the very top of the state. And when you're in a local county, like for example, I'm in Broward County. Because of all of the decisions that he has made, it trickles down and it causes numerous problems in our county. So, for example, we're suffering with a housing crisis. There's too many people, highways, food. I mean, everything has gone crazy, all because that there's no respect for Florida and the private sector here locally. It's all outsourced. It's all the New Yorkers, the people from Chicago, the people from California that are all coming down here, buying up land, taking up agriculture. It's like remembering again, like what we said earlier, when you're a parent, when you're a farmer, or, you're an independent entrepreneur. These are all important things, and you want to be able to be successful.
Right.
But if you have these type of obstacles, how on earth are you supposed to be successful? You know what I mean? It's like, we will make it better. Yeah, I'm done with that. Like, show me how you're going to make it better. Don't tell me, show me. Show me.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, especially with both political parties really attacking the middle class in general with all the taxation.
What middle class?
Well, there's none. I mean, that's why I think that's honestly why people are leaving places like California, New York, Illinois for places like Tennessee and Florida, is because it seems like you can only survive in a place like Los Angeles if you're worth billions of dollars or if you make no money at all. There is no middle ground. Like if you're just a W-2 employee making a few $100,000 a year, you're going to get you're going to get taxed up the wazoo, and then what little money you have left can't pay for the $7 a gallon gas and the $10 loaves of bread. So you wind up going to another
Same.
state just to be able to survive, right? And go to a place where there is more favorable incentives for local businesses and small businesses, or, you know, at least that's why I left California. It's not that I have like a massive issue with the people or the politics. It's just, it's hard to survive as a middle class person out there, you know?
Can I be honest? Like I lived in California. They care. It's like it's very similar to what like with specifically like with Illinois, where Illinois just cares about Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care about anywhere else. They don't care about none of their small towns, none of their other citizens. It's like only Chicago they care about. And LA has like not LA, sorry. California has the kind of same problem where they only care about like what? San Diego, LA,
San Francisco, LA, yeah.
Yeah, like they don't really care about anybody else. They don't care about all the cannabis growers or the agricultural farmers or, you know, the industrial workers there or the, you know, for example, the drivers that go throughout the state or the lumber workers. They don't give a damn about any of them.
Mm-hmm.
So like again, like, you know, I know that we've been like talking about politics, but this is honestly really important when you're talking about like business and person to person, because if that's what you care about, then how do you ever expect to have successful businesses in your own like property or land?
I think the more important thing is how are you going to attract more migration into your state from like
I didn't even think about that. Yeah,
top,
there you go.
Top talented workers. So you want migration because you want diversity. It makes everything better, but you also want highly skilled workers. You know, especially in California, which is a tech enclave, right? One of the biggest. I talk to people about this quite frequently. One of the things that bothers me a little bit is America's incessant need to trash the country that we all came from. And I think part of the problem is that, you know, there's very little to be proud of in the minds of a lot of people. But what I try to tell people is, think about it this way. We're one of the most innovative countries of all time. And what we've been exporting to the world is a sense of innovation, of entrepreneurship, and things like that. A lot of that's come from California over the years, but that's all going to die if we don't actually figure out a way to incentivize smart, educated people from wanting to go to California and develop products and designs in Silicon Valley. It's one of the best industries known to human history, right? Like things that we talked about in the earlier part of the show, the iPhone, iPad, you know, Apple's a huge company. Tesla was originally, you know, founded out in California.
Yeah.
Like there's so many things that make everyone in the world's lives better that come from California. But right now we're doing nothing but making people want to leave the state and we're making people not want to come to the state either, you know?
Yeah. And it's interesting because like, you know, you take a city, like I'm from New York originally, and New York, I understand that most people, when you hear New York, you think of the 5 boroughs. That's not the whole New York. There's the whole other
Hudson Valley, the Finger Lakes, all those.
Rockland County, you know, Sullivan County,
yeah,
Orange. I mean, like Westchester County, like all the way up to Buffalo, and we were a state of blue collar and hardworking Americans that come from immigrants. You know, from Puerto Ricans, Asians, Black communities, Jewish communities, and so on. Most of that's dead.
Yeah.
You know, like I moved down here and there's like a lot of people that I know from New York that came down here and they live here full time. Part of breweries, part of the artist industry that's going on here, new entrepreneurs that move their businesses down here. And like you said, that is what makes America so great. We're people of innovation. We're constantly innovating. And then when we're starved of that innovation, we move.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the things that we can all get together on in terms of like common identities, things that we care about, right? We've gone through three or four major stages of evolution in this country. We were originally an agricultural country, then we were an industrial country. Then when all the industry moved to China, we became we've become a design and a design thinking type country when it comes to, kind of white collar positions and AI, robotics, all that kind of stuff. That's really the only thing, on a global stage that we're still really, ultra competitive on is our intellectual property. But I think, we might have a couple of bounce back industries that might help, define the next wave of American industry. And I think one of those might be getting back to business from an agricultural perspective. I think cannabis might ignite another revolution in this country. At least that's why
you should check out what's been going on with cannabis out here in Florida. I mean, the cannabis growers, it's amazing what they've been able to be able to do, like night and day from California, because all of the regulations. It's like out here, they're like, they don't give a fuck. They're like, go ahead, send your patrol officers after me. We don't care.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the point being is that I think eventually, I mean, I don't know. I was half tempted to post a poll on LinkedIn and just give people the option of what year do you think we're going to be fully federally legal in cannabis, 2025, 2026, 2027, but not give them the answer for never, because it's not a viable option, right?
You're
right
not
now,
going to like the answer.
Well, right now we're at a position where, I think Business Insider or one of those publications put out an article back in November. We're at a stage right now in this country where more than 50% of all the consuming population has access to legal cannabis, right? For the first time in our country's history. I think we're up to like 30 states, including when you count medical and recreational programs. And it took us 10 to 12 years to get here. It's not going to take us another 10 to 12 years to get to get another 20. It'll maybe take, conservatively guessing, I would say till 2030, but aggressively, I think it could be as soon as within the next 2 to 3 years.
People don't tend to realize that we are at the beginning of the 21st century. And try to think about what the 21st century looked like, in
the 20th century,
in the 1900s. By the 1920s, there was the influenza epidemic, there was the Great War, there was massive starvation. I mean, like, and by the time we got to the year 1930, there was the Great Depression. And it was just like bam, bam, bam. Then 1940, World War II, bam. 1950, you got massive segregation throughout the country, and then Jim Crow, like one thing after the other. Fast forward to now, we're still dealing with insane crises and difficulties, but compare them to how it was at the beginning of the century, in the last century.
Oh yeah, I mean,
we're cruising, baby. Like this is fucking paradise right now.
Yeah, I agree. I tell people I'm friendly with the folks over at the Good News Network, and one of the things that I think is a massive mental health issue in this country is how toxic the news is. And it's not just news, it's social media as well. It's a whole stew of toxicity, and it's people just spewing garbage out there, and these hot takes that talk about how awful society is right now, how racist we are, how everything's going to hell in a handbasket, the sky is falling. But if you
climate change,
but if you really look at if you compare this decade to any, I mean, there's less wars all over the world. I think there's a statistic that says like either 30,000 or 40,000 people per day are lifted out of poverty worldwide. So there's some amazing things happening right now. But if all you take is the garbage hot takes that you see on the news or in social media, you would think that the world's falling apart. But it's actually, I grew up in the 80s, and the 80s were one of the most bloody decades in human history, with all the serial killers and all the, crimes that were happening back then, and how willy-nilly society was with policing. Nowadays, there's just way more preventative stuff that like we're just at a pretty decent spot in human history. But it completely goes ignored because people don't look statistically at things that way. They don't have an optimistic look on now versus then. They always have everything is worse now than it used to be, and everybody kind of looks at the world through rose-tinted glasses when it comes to the past, because they tend to bring positive memories and positive associations with them throughout life, not negative. So I don't know. It's one of those weird things where, are we better off now than we would have been 50 years ago? Probably. Does anybody going to think that way? Probably not.
No. And it's interesting because, like, for example, like, with the cobalt mines in the Congos, people are like, oh my God, there's like, it's terrible. Don't get me wrong. It's a horrible situation. But hey, it's Dave, and I quickly just wanted to jump in and say, if you've been enjoying the podcast, I'm enjoying this episode, if you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, that'll be so greatly appreciated. Because here's the thing. Someone might read that review and make the choice if they want to listen to the podcast. You get to help grow this podcast with us. How fucking cool is that? Let's jump back to today's episode. But are we the citizens of the Republic of Congo? No. So can we do anything to the country of the no, there's nothing. And it's the same thing with like Uganda that's now banning homosexuality. How dare, it's not our country.
Yeah. Not for us to control.
It's not for us to control. And it's like, I feel like there's a thing with Americans where we're always like kind of going out to other places, sticking our noses like Ukraine and Israel for no reason. And it's not our business. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not our country.
Yeah.
And this is going to come off as being like really harsh, but I feel like as an American, shouldn't we focus on Americans? American interracial couples, American white couples, American diverse couples, immigration couples, like all kinds of peoples, not even just couples. But we don't. We focus on the Republic of Congo. We focus on Uganda. We focus on Ukraine. We focus on the Israeli and Palestinian crisis that's going on. Why?
Well, I mean, originally, if you kind of go back and look at geopolitics, like I think we exported our views on the world because we wanted to destabilize regions, because it was a military advantage for us, and it kept people away from the not necessarily just general consumers or whatever, general people, more like it kept countries away from invading us if we took the wars and took all the shit to them. But now I think we're exporting our ideologies to them, which is not necessarily, I don't think it's neither here or there for us to try to convince people to live life a certain way. I think with taxpayer dollars, the only things that we should be doing from a global stage perspective is offering aid to certain countries that absolutely need it, and we're reliant upon those countries to do
limited
things like
let's clearly say limited aid, not send $14 billion.
No, I'm talking about that when there's countries that we're trade partners with, and that trade fails to exist if we don't continue to prop them up, and we need that trade in order for our country at home to actually survive. Like, we wouldn't be able to survive as a country if we didn't import cell phones right now, right? So to some extent, we rely on China and on Taiwan to get us the batteries we need, the devices we need to keep this modern society going. But does that mean I want to get into any kind of like multi-$100 billion conflict with countries out there to keep that industry propped up? No, not at all. So I'm with you on that. I don't know why we export our ideologies on people. I'd rather just give them a little money, leave it be, focus on the homeland, and let's carry on.
I mean, like, if, again, this is my opinion, the amount of money that has been poured in, for example, like Ukraine, and the supposedly, oopsie money. I'm like, we have an education crisis in this country right now. Okay, education crisis where parents are having the fear of, will my kid come home today and think that they're a boy or a girl? That's a reality for a lot of parents.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
you know,
I am a parent that has 4 kids,
there
and
you
two of them
go.
are in elementary school. I know the fears. I know what the risks are.
Right. So, you think about that for a second. Money like that and resources like that can be put into our society and start working on all of the problems that we're dealing with right now.
Mhm.
Because again, like the number one thing, and I said this from like the very beginning, we all want three basic things: safe community, financial responsibility, like, financial ability and being able to, and community.
Mhm.
That's it. Three things. Those are three basic things that every single American should be entitled to.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, yeah, I have no idea why they can't figure out ways to appropriately spend our money. But I've long said I don't mind paying. I'll pay 70% taxes if I get to decide where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with paying taxes, and the reason why I've like had a long journey to wind up in Tennessee, and why I'm glad I don't have to pay state income tax as an employee, is that I don't trust governments to spend my money on the people around me, right? They'll always mismanage the money somehow. If it was really going to the right places, and it was based on my value system and the things that I think are valuable, then sure, tax me as much as you want. But I don't believe that that's what you're going to do with my money. So, and I've been proven right time and time again.
Something, I feel that there's going to be a lot of changes within
Yeah.
the next 10 or 15 years. And, people say, it's never going to change. You know something? Never say never.
Yeah.
Never say never. It just takes, how they, with dominoes, right? They're all standing all neatly. Just takes that one schmuck that just taps it, and everything just collapses along with it. That's all it
Well,
takes.
people say nothing ever changes, but I mean, we're living proof. We're sitting here on a video podcast, right? Talking about politics or anything that comes to our mind. I mean, like,
And we're not oppressed at all.
eh,
Like, they're not canceling this recording right now or arresting us. Like, think about it. If we talked like this about our government in other countries, there'd be a knock on your door right now.
oh yeah. Yeah. And, but I mean, yeah, I mean, look, we started off the conversation by talking about COVID, right? Think about the fact that I work from home now and I permanently do so. And it doesn't really impact my productivity or my efficiency or my ability to earn money or earn a living. 10 years ago that would have been impossible, or not even 6 years ago that would have been impossible, right? So clearly the world does evolve, and the world does spin on its axis, and it changes and stuff like that. We went into talking about the Teddy Roosevelt years in the past 110 years and how much communications evolved and stuff like that. Change will happen. It'll happen. It'll feel like it's overnight, mainly because a lot of people are negligent or they don't see it coming. I remember my older sister was like technologically averse. She was always the last person with like like tapes, like cassette tapes.
Mm-hmm.
Then she didn't adopt CDs, and then she finally was the laggard that adopted CDs. And then after that, like, she was the last person to get an iPad, and like she just was the last person to adopt all these technologies. Whereas I was always the first. So like, to me, I have a different perspective on change because I see it happening all the time, and I'm excited by it. Like, I want to try things like ChatGPT and all these other things. So
Yeah.
I'm more of an optimist in that regard.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we were touching on this too about how, like you mentioned, you being able to work from home. You know, one thing that has been very difficult for parents is because, you know, most parents today can't have just one working, to be able to keep things financially afloat. You have to have two parents working. And the ability to have either one parent being able to work at home or two parents working at home can really help. For example, kids that come home and have a really bad day, their parents are there to take care of them. You're pretty much always there, and you're able to have that ability.
Yeah, when I was a kid, there was like, they called it latchkey kids. Like, when you got off school, you went home and you were like 9 years old and nobody would be there, and you just like get the key from under the rug and you'd go in your house and watch TV. At 9 years old, people were doing that. Nowadays that's not happening. If anybody can't have parental supervision of their kids at home when they're that young, you have to hire a babysitter, you have to do something. So but you're right. It's just the society we live in. It's really unaffordable to be able to. I'm prime example. Like, could we have one of us, either me or my wife, stay home? We could figure it out, but it would be very uncomfortable financially to do so. We'd have to cut back dramatically on our spending and stuff like that, which, obviously is not that big of a deal, but not everybody wants, you make a good living, you want to be able to enjoy it. Not everybody wants to skimp and save every single penny all year long for 10 years straight, but that's what a lot of people are faced with if they've got a single income family.
I know. And it's, something, it's also like, it's also strange because who do you want who do you want to raise your kids? You want a bunch of woke teachers that are trying to remove their put on a fake dick or something and tell your kids about their pronouns or whatever and shit? Or like, I mean, that's kind of where we're going at this point. Like, that's your new parent.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh
well,
boy.
that's a sensitive topic, but I feel
I
like
don't give a damn.
I feel like I get a little bit less out of that in my teachers in Tennessee than I might have in California. So
Yeah. That's a
I'll
that's a good plus.
I'll take the political route, the politically correct way out of that conversation, and just say I'm happy I'm in Tennessee.
Well, you mentioned that before, and I think that's really awesome. I mean, that you're able to find a place like Tennessee and be able to reestablish your family there and be able to. I know that especially relocation can be hard,
Oh yeah.
especially when you're dealing with kids. And they've got friends and stuff. And I mean, in your case, did you started your business in California and then moved it? No, you started it in Tennessee.
No, I was still working for Gary Vee at Vayner when I was in California, and my boss was okay with us moving here because we were working remote anyway. So when I decided to move to Tennessee, my boss and my wife's boss didn't care because we were all working remote anyway. There was no in person working at our company for 2 years or something like that. So I moved to Tennessee knowing that eventually that policy might go back in reverse and be a hybrid or an in-person work scenario. But I honestly didn't care because my job responsibility, the people that I managed were all not in the same city as me anyway. So it was, we were going to do it. We were going to be remote one way or the other, whether or not we were in an office or at our house. So we moved to Tennessee, and then I left Vayner last year because I was ready to. I'm in the process of launching a THC infused cannabis brand called Fuzzy Water. That's launching in Missouri later this year, and then I want I figured that was going to heat up a little bit more because we're at the manufacturing and distribution stage right now, and it was going to be more than just a side hustle. So I told Gary I wanted to leave in 2023, and he obliged, and we kind of set a separation date of mid-year. And in the meantime, I decided to launch a consulting company because my cannabis brand is a startup, so our investors aren't going to really think too keenly of my big chunky salary on on our books. So I wanted to be able to kind of round out my income streams by being able to do some fractional CMO consulting, and through the grace of God, I've been able to latch on with a couple of other cannabis brands as their fractional CMO. So brands like American Weed Company and Mana Supply Co. And I've also got a client named Zonti. He's a Christian rapper that I'm the CMO of his enterprise. So I've been able to be incredibly fortunate and work with some awesome people on the side of also going out and launching my own company.
It's really cool because like the cannabis community, even in the United States, like cannabis businesses, and it's small. Like I try to like imagine like if you had a convention, just like a convention in a hotel, you probably can fit all of the cannabis businesses in that convention throughout the United States at this point. And it's really cool because at this point like you're dealing with a lot of private businesses, dealing with investors, and sometimes you have farmers that also own their own companies, or sometimes farmers that have investors and they have another partner or whatever. I love it. I mean, it just goes to show you like the resilience and just strength of the cannabis industry in this country.
Yeah, I love it too, and I think I'm incredibly fortunate that I'm getting a chance to get in on the ground floor level as an entire industry develops. And I think that the people that get in now, even though it's tough because it's really a cash business because of all the safe banking and insurance
Mm-hmm.
issues, it's a really tough business to be in right now because of all that and like the wonkiness of the interstate regulations and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can stomach the volatility, it's a really good long term strategy because once it does, there's a difference between when alcohol came out of prohibition and became a thing again and what we're doing here. Because unlike alcohol, cannabis actually has a wellness component to it, with CBD and hemp and all that kind of stuff, and CBN, CBG, like just really understanding the endocannabinoid system and how much good cannabis can do for people like that have, you know, medical trauma, psychological trauma,
Oh,
PTSD, stress,
oh my God.
anxiety, that you name
Preach.
them. I'd
Preach.
rather. I'd rather. I'm a big skeptic of the medical industrial complex. So, like, my kids are. My oldest kid is about to turn 9. When she's in her 20s, I've read some statistics say 1 in 4 Gen Z, you know, I would say kids, but that would be disparaging them. 1 in 10 people, or 1 in 4 people in Gen Z, are coping with some form of depression and need depression medicine. And when I think about that, I'm like, would I rather get my kids hooked on depression medicine or some sort of pharmaceutical drug, or would I rather just have them smoke a joint and kind of calm down and like, or deal with their ADHD? It doesn't have to be depression; it could be ADHD or whatever the case may be. My point of view is that those things are probably for the most part good and good for a certain type of person, but I also think that there's room in this world for more natural therapies, and cannabis being one of them.
Yeah, and you know something, it's interesting because like cannabis has been around for
Tens of thousands of years.
tens of thousands of years and has been used as a medicinal healing ailment with, I mean, go throughout the history, even as like Jewish people, we supposedly one of the scents that they used to use in the altar was actually weed. So it's very weird on how like we're at a point now we're still dealing with it not being federally legal.
Mhm.
And the only reason why it's not federally legal was because of a racial misconduct between the Hispanics and the black community. So I always find it so stupid. It's so dumb. It's basically where there was a department of government that was getting shut down after prohibition and they needed an excuse to stay around. So they kind of made up this crap thing about like the marijuana. And they're like, there's this war that's going on with the blacks and the Hispanics, and we must oppress this. I'm like, are you normal? Like, what is wrong with you? All to save their life, like all to save their, and then it just keeps on getting worse from there.
Yeah.
And again, it's like you're thinking about yourself. You're not even thinking about all of the people. Think about it. Like back in 1937, they didn't think about all of the people that they affected, all the people that have gone to prison, all of the people that could have benefited from cannabis that didn't.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, not to shift the blame or do whataboutism or whatever, but like again, not to keep harping on alcohol, but if you look at all the murders, if you look at all the domestic abuse, if you look at all the car accidents that lead to deaths, like you don't have to sniff very far to find the scent of alcohol, right? Like I think it's like 75 to 80% of all domestic abuse cases have alcohol involved. I think, 50% of all murders have alcohol involved. Like there's just not a lot of cannabis use that leads to people murdering each other, so I feel like, what are we talking about here? Like cannabis can be controlled in a way that alcohol can't, and there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's a much better psychoactive effect. It's much more controllable. It can be used in therapy. It should be used in therapy. I want my vets coming home from war and being able to have access to cannabis. I don't want them to have access to liquor. I don't think liquor is really healthy for people with mental health issues. But as a society, we've demonized cannabis and we've glorified alcohol. I think the interesting thing is Gen Z's kind of leveling that playing field. God bless their hearts. And they're consuming less alcohol than they ever have than any other generation prior to them.
I don't really drink that much alcohol. Like
and they're
I work in a brewery, but I try to limit myself as much as possible. Like we were talking about this before. Like I'm dealing with I quit nicotine due to like severe congestion that I've been dealing with and horrible chest pain. Like nicotine withdrawal is insane. Okay. And like I haven't been smoking cannabis and like I'm not having any cannabis withdrawals. Like I would
Yeah.
love to smoke weed, but like I'm not like, I need my weed. I need my please. I need that's not how people get with alcohol and cigarettes. They
Yeah.
get fucking crazy, but you don't get like that with cannabis. You don't get like that generally with psychedelics. And the reason is because these are like natural plants that your brain has chemicals that interact with them. Your brain has evolved to actually work with these compounds. We have cannabidiol that runs through our body. You know, ask anybody that knows anatomy and knows anything about the human body, they will tell you it is a part of the human body. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
It is, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't think we're very far off from a period where you're going to be able to go into your brewery and you can have an option where it's going to be a non-alcoholic IPA that's got hops and terpenes in it, and it actually gets you high, and you don't have any hangover effects. It's a nice, clean drinking session where get a little high, go home, hang out a little bit. Next day, no hangover, that kind of thing. I think society needs that. I wouldn't say that we as a society need to kill the drinking fellowship. I think there's a lot of health that comes along with fellowship with other human beings and being in person with them. So I think there is a role for drinking in society. I would rather take the alcohol out. I'd rather remove the alcohol and insert cannabis into it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's really strange because like there's a lot of fear mongering. Okay, so my mom sent me this, and Fox News has been doing a lot of this recently. A lot of fear mongering where they've been victimizing mushrooms, they've been victimizing cannabis, they've been victimizing MDMA therapy. They had recently this dumbass went on a plane and took a bunch of shrooms. And they're like, and he went crazy on the plane. I'm like, okay, you're over 45,000 feet above altitude. Okay. That's number one. Number two, you're in a pressurized cabin with hundreds of people. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah. I mean, if they really want to play that game, like they should give the same level of attention to the guy that went crazy by drinking a fifth of Jack Daniels and killed his wife. Like that's happening every day times 1,000 in this country. So like, again, what are we talking about here? Like we could is that really a news article where somebody does some hallucinogenic drugs and goes crazy? I don't know. I tend to think that we should try to limit any exposure to people that shouldn't be around drugs or alcohol. We should figure out a way to prevent them from getting close to drugs and alcohol. But that same person could have easily, drank a bunch of alcohol and done the same thing.
And something, it's weird, like instead of having that bizarro story, you could just basically stop making the law so crazy for researchers and scientists and chemists that they can actually do the work that they need to do. For example, you look at organizations like MAPS that's been working on MDMA therapy for God knows how many decades. And the amount of work that he has had to fight just for his research to continue development and continue going. It's hard to believe that people that want to do research, even within cannabis, are having a very difficult time because of the limitations, because of the restrictions, because of the state lines and guides. Like there are things researchers can do in the state of Florida you cannot do in Missouri, and vice versa. You cannot do in others. you're making the education, the safety, all of this very difficult for people. It's like it's not necessary. It really isn't.
Yeah, I mean, especially if we take a similar approach to what you have in cannabis, like if we could open up a medical program for other kind of, I wouldn't say extreme, but I would say like fringe, natural drugs like mushrooms and stuff like that, or not even natural necessarily, like LSD. Like LSD has been proven to actually cut down on
DMT.
DMT. These things have been proven to cut down on alcoholism and nicotine abuse, right? If you can change your brain chemistry by using some of these drugs, you could actually get rid of some of the more hardcore addictions out there, but just by microdosing or just by using occasionally, right? But nobody wants to talk about that. They'd rather pump you full of these pharmaceutical drugs that they can, you know, that they make a ton of money off of, that line their pockets around election time. So, maybe we'll get a really, really wealthy billionaire financier in the cannabis industry, and they can just pay off all the politicians too.
Yeah, it's funny because talking about
That's what we need. We need Elon Musk to own a hemp farm. Then he can pay off all the politicians for us.
Listen, you put it out there. We might see him on Joe Rogan again. This time, not just eating anchovies and pineapples on pizza, but he might be like, Joe, I bought a bunch of hemp fields
I think he does get fucked up. I think he probably would. I mean, he's the kind of guy that strikes me as somebody that would do mushrooms. I don't know that for a fact, but I think I've heard some stories about him getting high.
I mean, he names his children after math equations, so I really wouldn't put it past him.
Yeah.
It's interesting because even talking about cannabis, one of the things that I have had conversations with people where they're like, well, it didn't really work for me because it kind of made things work. It didn't solve all my problems.
Right.
And one of the things that I've had to learn really on, being a cannabis user, is you can't just smoke it or eat it or vape it and expect it to solve all of your problems. This is the thing we've gotten so accustomed to with modern, pharmaceutical medication. It's where you just pop the pill and it does everything for you. When you deal with medicinal plants and psychedelics, it's not how it works. You have to put in the effort. You have to change your mental thinking, and you have to be able to be open to it. And if you're not, it's not going to work. It's not.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big advocate for cannabis, but me as a consumer, I'm a very lightweight consumer of it. I use topicals, I do gummies, I don't smoke anything. But I'm a very paranoid person when I'm on cannabis. So I can only do it in very small increments. But that's fine. I know the risks. I know my personality. I know how to approach it, from a mental perspective, and I know what I can and can't do. And I think more people, if they approach anything, that's the approach I want everybody to take. Understand yourself, be self-aware enough to understand what you're putting in your body, and know how your brain's going to react to it. But don't demonize it and kind of and cast a blanket over all of society and say it's going to interact with every single personality the same way, because it's not. That's all lies.
No. And it's one of those things where it's a trial and error process when you start. I've had, actually, I don't know if you know this, there's somebody by the name of David Putvin.
Okay.
He's based out in Utah. He works with a lot of farmers. I can actually give you his information if you're interested.
Great.
He wrote an incredible book that breaks down everything about cannabis. But people will, for example, start and it doesn't work, and I'm like, well, maybe you should try gummies. Maybe you should try live rosin. Maybe try something with higher THC. Maybe it's one of those things where you can't just try something with cannabis. You know what I mean? And it's gonna work.
Yeah.
You have to be patient. You got to try different products. You got to be open to trying different products. It's just
start with the idea of there are different strains, and different strains do different things, right? If you want a more relaxed experience, do some indica or maybe a hybrid. If you want to go for a run and you want to be productive, maybe try sativa. but the understanding that those strains they exist and are different. And it's not like it was 20 years ago when you're just getting a bag of weed off your drug dealer. Like going into a controlled environment, into a dispensary and talking to a bud tender is a much different experience than you probably recall when you were a lot younger. So go in and do it, and like kind of like going into the Apple store and talking to your guy about the technology behind the screen. Talk to these bud tenders about how this product can help you, and what you're looking for out of it, and then go from there.
Awesome. I love that. I know that we spent like pretty much the whole time talking about politics, but I love how we got into cannabis because this is one of the things that, I mean, come on, who doesn't like weed? Do you want to talk more about, like, for example, I know you touch base about your business, more about your podcast, which
Sure.
I'm really sorry. Like we didn't talk about your podcast at all this entire episode.
It's all good. No, I mean, so I don't drink anymore. I used to run beer brands for Gary. I ran AB InBev. That's Budweiser, Bud Light, Stella Artois, Michelob, Natty. This is before all the controversy happened with Bud Light this summer. This was like from 2014 to 2019. So it's enough in the rearview mirror. But I quit drinking in 2018, and it wasn't because of alcoholism. When I quit drinking, it was actually relatively easy. It was more because of health issues. My doctor told me I was going to get gout if I didn't stop drinking beer. And at the time, I mean, I kind of grew up a beer drinker. I didn't like any of that. I didn't like liquor. I didn't like wine. I'm not like Gary. I don't have a taste for wine at all. So if I couldn't drink beer, it was like, all right, I'm not going to drink anything. But it was weird. Over the next few years, when I would tell people that I was sober, people would look at me like I had like three eyes, or like I had like an extra hand or something like that. Like I was this thing that was to be studied in the Museum of Natural History or something like that. And it was kind of really odd because I started really taking inventory of the people in my life that I've known. And I've been fortunate to have a pretty high end career in marketing and advertising. So I know a lot of very successful people. And I think that one of the things that I found in common amongst most of the very successful people I know is they either don't drink or they drink very sparingly. And it's mainly because they know what it's going to do to their brain and their memory, and they can't afford for it to do that to them.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah.
And so I quit drinking, and I started noticing those things. And then along the way, I started noticing a lot of new products showing up in the non-alcoholic space. When I first stopped, there was nothing. It was like O'Doul's, and that's pretty much the whole game when it came to non-alcoholic stuff. Now there's hundreds of non-alcoholic beer brands, some that are very nationally reputable, like Athletic Brewing Co. and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's mocktails up the yin yang, like they're all over the place. Every bar has got a massive mocktail menu, and we started seeing the trend of people going more sober curious, dry January, all that kind of stuff. So I linked up with a couple of buddies of mine. These are the same guys that I'm launching my cannabis infused beverage with, and we decided to put a podcast out that celebrates the stories of people that don't drink alcohol, which is more people than you would think. Now, some of the people that we talk, and this is called the Fuzzy-ish Podcast, the Kind of Sober Show. We say kind of sober because we don't drink alcohol. We do other things. So it's kind of like that Cali sober vibe, right? Like,
yeah.
There's better things to actually consume if you want a psychoactive effect, is kind of the way we see it. And we're big believers in microdosing and stuff like that. But we have people on the podcast. Some people are hardcore alcoholic recovery type people that went through a 12-step program, and that's what they needed to get sober, and God bless them that they are. Some people are like me. They didn't really have much of an alcohol problem. They just needed a different change of scenery. They needed to kind of change the script on their life, if you will. And so that's really what we do. And we're about 25 episodes in now. We've had some pretty amazing guests on.
Nice.
But we're really just trying to popularize this notion of, we call it Me Total, which is just a lifestyle that's more intentional and more purposeful. So one that doesn't destroy your body in the process.
I think that's amazing. I think that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, it really goes to show not only awareness, but also the open possibility of you don't need alcohol always to have fun. I can tell you that some of the best times that I've had with friends doesn't always include a drink. It's just we laughed, we had a good joke, we shared a joint. A lot of
Yeah.
times for me is just sharing a joint,
Yeah.
and just like laughing the shit out of like just something so stupid, like you say like camel brain, and you just balls like just laughing so hard, and you have no idea why you're hysterically laughing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's
It's
so
awesome.
important. So, like, I think there's a lot of things that contribute to what makes us physically, spiritually, and mentally healthy. And the more if I had one vision for the future, it's that the world would be less full of alcohol and alcoholism, and more full of people that are intentionally maximizing their potential as humans, whether or not they use cannabis or LSD or whatever else they want to consume. And it doesn't have to be any of those things. It could be nothing. It could,
Right.
but I think the purpose is continue to have all of the societal benefits of fellowship and partnership with other humans. Just don't rely on things. Try to avoid addiction if possible. Try to figure out ways to kind of, at least look at your body from a third party perspective and understand what you're putting into it and what you're doing to it. And so I'm not like innocent across all means. I obviously have vices and addictions, sugar being one of them. But at least I'm self aware enough to know these things and try to work on them.
See, I like that. I mean, I feel like a lot of us have. We live in the land of sugar.
There's a lot of things that people are
God.
addicted to, including if you watch like Huberman and who's that other guy, Gary Brecka down there in Miami. If you watch some of these neuroscientists, I think what we're starting to learn is that a lot of people are just addicted to dopamine hits. So the reason why people go on their Instagram or their TikTok and look for the notifications, the reason why people look at porn, the reason why people eat food when they're not hungry, these are all things that are driven by dopamine inside of your body. It's a chemical reaction in your brain. And so I think part of it just starts with even knowing that,
Well,
and educating
yeah.
yourself on that.
And you're right. Again, like the idea of being able to have that awareness, but more importantly, like acknowledging that awareness.
Yeah. Well, it's about getting better in this body while on earth, right? That's the only thing, you could do you could choose to do a lot of different things. I believe human beings were put here to learn lessons, and I want to learn as many as I can.
There you go. Simple. And something, you take it day by day,
Yep.
and thing is, sometimes life will be absolutely amazing, sometimes you'll have downs, sometimes you'll fail. That's the whole
Yeah.
purpose about being human, and
Depends on whether or not you're spiritual. I happen to consider myself a Christian, and somebody put it in a nice way to me the other day when we were talking about the long struggle or struggling for prolonged period of time, whether it's financially or faith based or fitness based or whatever. And I forget what I heard, but I think it's a pretty popular saying that there is no testimony without being tested, and that's something you see repetitively throughout the Bible or the Quran or whatever or the Old Testament. You see this idea of God testing his people. When the Israelites came out of Egypt, they didn't automatically go into Israel and were saved and whatever.
40 days, 40
They
nights.
they wandered around the desert for 40 years. So, I think that's something to keep in mind. We're going to be tested. There's going to be hard times, but we have the ability to control our perspective and our attitude that we bring to the table in those struggles. So, hopefully that people can come in contact with people like me and you, and they can see how positive we are, and that makes them want to live a more positive life.
Yeah, and to add to your point, like pertaining to faith, like I'm not a religious person by any means. Whenever I'm like in a time of my life, for example, like a new position or something that's going on, like Carissa, which is the host of American Groove, she's a religious Christian, and I'll message her and I'm like, "Can you pray for me?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't believe in Jesus, I don't believe in God, but that's her faith, and I know as a person that's spiritual that when you have friendships and when you're connected with others, whether it be family members, a spouse, someone that you're close with, regardless, when you're connected with them and you're able to bring in their faith and say, "Hey, I'm going through something. Can you pray for me? Can you be there for me?"
Mm-hmm.
That's all that you need to be able to ask and be able to be open to. Sometimes you need somebody to put their hand out. and hold.
I mean, we all define it as something slightly different, but at the end of the day, if you kind of really stack up all these beliefs and compare them to one another, we're all kind of pointing back at the same thing. You know, I was talking to somebody on the podcast the other day, and she kept making reference of source and energy and stuff like that, and I'm like, the way you talk about source and energy is the same way I talk about gods. Like, you know, we could probably sit around and have a prayer together and accomplish the same stuff. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just people have, I think a lot of people have a lot of trauma and baggage when it comes to certain, especially the way society has defined God and Jesus and all these different types of religious figures and stuff like that. So I'm not the type of person that's going to, you know, try to talk somebody out of any kind of, you know.
Do you know what fixes the problem though? Just
weed.
Yeah, weed. Exactly. You get everybody together, atheists, you know, Christians, Jews, Muslims. You give them a joint, pass it around.
Well, I think what fixes it all is just a common respect and love for other human beings. So, like the thing that we can connect with, no matter what, is I'll usually give people my love and respect up front. You don't owe me anything. You don't have to pay me anything. You don't have to earn my respect or anything like that. You don't have to earn my trust or my love or admiration. You, as another human being, have it implicitly. And I think the more we can treat each other like that, the more we can kind of see past our differences.
Yeah. Oh my God. Damn. Wow. This episode has gone all different directions, and I love it. I love every minute of it, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. Joe, let me ask you a question. I know you mentioned your podcast, which is the Fuzzy-ish, kind of sober podcast. Where can people find like your social media, like your website?
Yeah. So if you look up Super Quattrone, the word super and then my last name, that's the social handle I've been using since I was probably, I don't know, 15 or 17 or 18 or whenever social media came out back in the mid 2000s. That's what I've been using across everything: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. That's what I use. I'm probably the most active on LinkedIn and Instagram. So if you want to hit me up in the DMs, feel free to hit me up in the DMs. You can also email me at joe@quattronebrands.com if you have any interest in working with me professionally. You can check out my website at quattronebrands.org, I believe. So
awesome.
There you have it.
There you go. All in one. OG handle and a website. I fucking love it. Well, listen. To anybody that's listening to this podcast, if you want to check out more, you can find us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Lost in the Groove Pod. So with that, Joe, it's been a real pleasure. I'm going to be a part of this wild ride. Catch you guys on the next one. Bye, everybody.